Welcome to Andy's Donut, a podcast about everything, anything, and nothing in between. Hello friends, welcome to another episode. Our guest today in this beautiful May afternoon in the middle of the forest is my friend Ocean. Or you want to present yourself?
Well, yes, I've been on quite a few of these. I always enjoy our conversations, Andy, so I'm looking forward to this one, as quite a bit has happened. But I've been following the spiritual path for a while, and I've set up two U3A groups. One is spirituality, which has been going 9 years now, and the new one that I've just set up is one called the Meditation Workshop, which is to do with meditation, because I think that's very important in these times, because it's getting a bit crazy out there.
Last time we spoke was it last year?
Yeah, it was something about middle last year, and my idea was this year was going to be a big year of transition, and I was rather hoping that something would happen between then and now, but actually there's a bit happening. This is visible to the ordinary person. There's a lot happened behind the scenes, but we're still waiting basically, and it could now be the summer solstice. That's what I've kind of like got a marker. Whether it happens then or not, you know, it's down to divine timing, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, so since last time we spoke, what happened in the meantime?
Well, we've had the congressional hearings about UA. The one I'm really interested in is the extraterrestrial story and what's called disclosure. And if you remember last time I talked about this thing called catastrophic disclosure, which would be not very good for us because the information be coming too quickly. So it's got to be paced, but currently it's drip, 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 and there are still people trying to stop the disclosure happening, which is a bit frustrating because we want to get going on it. In fact, next weekend I'm going down to a conference in Eastbourne, the Galactic Spiritual Informers Conference, with Michael Salla, Elena Dinan, Tony Rodriguez and many others, which I'm really looking forward to, because there's going to be quite a bit of information disclosed there, but it's still, you know, let's say 1,000 people turn up, which, I mean, so it's quite a big place. It's a big theatre they've taken on board. And on the Saturday, which is next Saturday, there's a big event going to happen, which is a flyover by extraterrestrials.
Well, you said last year it's going to happen.
This year, it's got to happen this year.
Well, you said that last year.
I know.
But let's go back to you know, from last time we spoke till now. A lot of things happened in the meantime. So with Donald Trump getting re-elected and all that thing, we expected to see a lot of things happening and a lot of things going down the hill, as you said, even though I think we ended up the conversation last time on a positive note, saying that in the end everything's going to be all right.
And I still hold that view, and it's an ascension process. The spiritual component of it is ascension. If you like, the physical thing is the meeting up with extraterrestrials, and they might be connected, because the extraterrestrial beings that we're going to have contact with will provide us. This is the David Wilcock story, and I quite like it. They've got the original human DNA that was given to them by Prince Ea, who actually genetically engineered that version of us. Since then, the Enlil crowd have dumbed us down, so we've ended up with an avatar in this virtual reality that decays after about 80, 90 years. If you get to 100, you've done real well. But this body is meant to last a lot longer than that. But because of the way they wanted to control us, if the older you get, the idea is you become wiser. And I think there's some truth to that, although, you know, you could argue. So if we live to, say, 200 years, then the second half of our life would be we'd be able to spend time, which I'm actually spending now, on spiritual work, meditation, learning out who I am, what I'm, the nature of me, and actually loving that, and moving into a really beautiful place. But it's only available if you're not working. You don't have to worry about money, and all that nonsense, because all that will get scrapped in the new world that we're going to generate. And it's just around the corner, guys.
Let's connect the events that happened and try to find out some clues about what you're talking about. Yeah. Are there any clues in the media or in the events that have happened?
There is this disclosure process, which also includes that our governments are corrupt. They're being captured by this.
Well, that's common knowledge.
Yeah, I think that's really common knowledge. We want to get, well, there's some things which are pretty obvious to me, like 9/11 is a phony story, January 6th, another phony story. The one that they promised us was the JFK assassination files and the Robert Kennedy assassination files. Now, they released the John F. Kennedy, but of course they've destroyed all the really juicy stuff, and what they released was more or less the stuff we already knew. So it didn't really do the job of waking people up to the scale of corruption in the agencies in America.
Are you talking about this Dodge thing with Elon Musk?
That's fascinating, seeing all the corruption there. Like the Institute of Peace, I don't know if you've seen that one.
No.
They had armed weapons in their offices, the Institute of Peace, and they spent $130,000. It wasn't like a huge amount. Was it 130 million? I can't remember. It was a significant chunk of money to a guy who used to be in the Taliban. You know, with gender alteration, you know, that's their thing that they were on with. And there's so many other little scam projects that they were on with, and, you know, pork barrel stuff.
So is this all about money, or who's benefiting?
So the question is, if everybody's in debt, like our government's in debt, our councils are in debt, we're in debt, you know, the whole system seems to be, who do we all owe all this money to? This is one of the little mysteries to the whole thing. The problem is the interest on the money, because what Farsight was saying was the level of interest on the American debt, this is 37 trillion, is something like $1 trillion, which is the largest single expenditure of the government, and it's growing exponentially, because if you don't pay off the interest, you have interest on the interest.
Exactly, yeah.
And it's called an exponential growth. It just shoots up like this. So it's not sustainable, and they know it's not sustainable. And he says what his view would be, that Trump will bring about a financial restructuring of that debt. And his basis for saying this is that Trump has actually been through 4 bankruptcies, which I wasn't aware of, but he says there's Taj Mahal was the first one that went down, and he learned the rules of how you go through a restructuring, through a bankruptcy, and come out of it stronger, which is what he accomplished 4 times. Until now, he's a multi-billionaire. A
man who's been through so many bankruptcies is in charge of ruling
of a bankrupt country.
A country, and he's going to do the same thing to the country, basically.
Yes. Yeah, he's the best person to do it, because he knows how to do it.
Yeah, but
but the point is, whenever he did it, he came out stronger. So it's a nasty process, say 6 months to a year, where a lot of truth is going to come out as to the mess that they've got themselves into over many previous presidents. It's not like it's his presidency, but his presidency might be the one that resolves a major problem for America and the world, because what Courtney Brown pointed out was it has to be a global collapse, because otherwise people will move money from America into what they think is a safe place. But if there's no safe places on the planet, because everybody's bankrupt, which they all are,
so
we all go through this process.
So bankrupting the country is a good thing?
No, he hasn't bankrupted. It's already bankrupt.
Okay.
He sorts the mess out. That's the way I read it. No. But there are people who don't like Trump, obviously, and I'm not very keen on him, to be quite honest. He seems to have a lot of ego in him. But I don't think you could be president unless you have a fairly huge ego, because why else would you do it? That's the last job I'd take on board, because the amount of negative press he gets is unbelievable. I get the paper, I read it every day, and every single day the article and the letters from newsreaders is always negative about him. And then they're also going negative, Elon, and they're going negative Nigel Farage, who's just had a major victory.
What happened with that in the UK with Nigel Farage?
Oh, I think Nigel Farage could be our next Prime Minister. It wouldn't surprise me.
And is that a good thing or a bad thing, do you think?
The system needs a major shake-up, and that's the problem. A lot of people don't want to have their little world shaken up. But we have to go through that because we can't continue with a corrupt government, a corrupt health system, a corrupt political system, a corrupt judicial system, a corrupt educational system, a corrupt food system. What system isn't corrupt? You tell me, which out of all the systems we've got for running human affairs hasn't been corrupted by these so-and-so.
Well, who's going to guarantee us that the next Prime Minister won't continue the same corruption?
Because of the ascension process. So that's a shift, an entire shift of the way we operate from this operating system, this corrupt system, into a new system that's been prophesied in many, in fact, I think all major systems have a prophecy for these times.
Well, yeah.
Including the Zoroastrian system, which I really like, which they call it Frajo Kereti, which means making new.
But I think that's like this cycle repeating itself. I think it's a common thing in history where, you know, civilizations rise and fall. I think it's a well-known theme, and I don't know if it's necessarily need to be a prophet to realize that in the future some of the civilizations will fall and others will rise.
Now this was a global planetary.
Also, it's a global, not a...
Yes. We're all going to go through this on the entire planet.
That's bad.
Good. Because we move into a whole new way of operating, which is much more humane.
Yeah, but this is like one of those things where you say that the phoenix bird needs to burn first to build itself, yeah. But I think that's quite dramatic and tragic, you know? Yeah. Like an apocalypse, basically.
It is. The original meaning of apocalypse is revealing the truth. And it's got perverted into the sense of a disaster, sort of a material level disaster. It never had that original meaning, but of course Hollywood loves this. I mean, there's the Last of Us is this latest one I've been watching a little bit of, but it just got so negative I had to touch it off. I just wanted to get what the latest take on it was, and that one was a fungus virus infection. I don't know if you know the story. And that's the cause of the disaster, and we've got post-apocalyptic sort of world.
I mean, every religion has this apocalypse in it. At the end of time, you know, things happen, the world gets rebirth, and everything starts all over again.
Yes, it's actually natural. I mean, I live in the forest, you see, and I see it. The winter comes in, everything, all the leaves drop, it all goes into a very quiet, cold sort of place, and then you've got this beautiful spring in May. I love May, and if we have a chance we might go to the forest and have a look at all the bluebells are out. There's a lovely part of the forest, so I take our meditation group into the forest and do what's called forest bathing, which is a Japanese inspired process to because the trees have their own immune system. They're living beings in their own way. They obviously have a slightly different consciousness to us, but they need an immune system like we need an immune system, and it's called phytophenols or something like that, and they exude that. And so when you breathe in the air, so this is the scientific explanation for something which is really, we just know that being in the forest, breathing in that highly oxygenated air is good for you. You feel refreshed. So I look at all this stuff and all the negativity that's going on. There is a lot of negativity, and it's really challenging for a lot of people, and I'm feeling the pinch as well. So in a way, you know, it's not easy, this process. It never was meant to be. It's called the time of tribulation, And the idea behind it is to wake us up to our deeper spiritual nature.
So how do you keep yourself motivated?
Sometimes it's not as easy as it looks. It used to be really full on, because I was doing a lot of work on grid work, getting in the Earth is actually got its own consciousness, and it has grid lines like meridians that flow through. We've got grid lines in our body which are hit by the acupuncture points, and they're effectively acupuncture points on the planet, sacred sites, and we know what they all are, and quite a few of them being corrupted by the negatives, and a group of us, inspired individuals, lots of Melchizedeks in there, have been to these various places and cleaned them up. And now the planet's ready for ascension, because she's going through it as well as us.
So is that enough to keep you motivated?
Oh yes, and where we are is so amazing that we've got to the place where we will enter the golden age. The new earth will manifest. There's no chance of the other timeline playing out. It's gone.
So what will be the event that will crush your hopes? I don't know if you ever thought about that. But
The time scales were originally 2030 or 2029, then they got shifted to 2027. So a lot of people still keep the 2027, but there's also a fair number of prophecies of 2025, which I've investigated. And David Wilcox has brought quite a few forward. There's one from Saint Germain and Voltaire. Anna Blavatsky had it as 2025. There's a few other ones saying 2025. So if it doesn't happen this year, I've always got 2027 to fall back on.
yeah, that's true. But you know, it's what if we get to 2030 and
nothing's changed?
Nothing's changed. Then...
Well, the likelihood of that, if you think about all that's going on, is pretty limited. The only problem would be is if the change is negative. See, the politicians go along and say change, but what they don't say is it change for the better or change for the worse? And it depends who you are, because if you're a banker, you want to get the people in change to release all your bonuses, which is what that dreadful woman trusted, you see. So the Conservatives, I think, are more or less out of the game. I don't think they've got much of a chance of getting back in. So that leaves Labour, and that wooden top guy that was running Labour, Starmer. I mean, honestly.
How do you see our lives after 2030?
So one of the big spiritual processes that you can do when you're meditating or whatever is called visioning. And Pam Gregory is doing them every 7 o'clock every evening. There's a group of us collectively with mass meditation tuning in to the vision for the future. And the vision is a vibrant world thriving. So you go in and you have fruits that you haven't had before, and the colours are brighter, and you go down, the little meditation is just you go down some water and it's also glistening, and kids are playing and having fun in the water, and it's just a naturally loving place with animals that are all doing well, and it's a beautiful place to be. And right at the end she says, and there's no sense of possession. And I thought, you're on there. You see, when you're in this other consciousness,
you don't need anything.
You don't need anything, you see. You don't need 6 Ferraris or a big boat in the Mediterranean. You're very happy just being who you are in a natural environment. Of course, you want the natural environment to be clean and healthy, unpolluted, and health is a big issue here, and there's so much ill health on the planet, and that's down to, you know, our wonderful friends, the deep state.
That sounds great, but isn't that an utopia?
It is kind of like, it's a word for this new earth, which is actually in the Bible. It's the new Jerusalem comes down from heaven to earth, and there's this sense of a splitting, although in there they say the old earth goes, but in my understanding of it, well, this is where it gets complicated because it's virtual realities. So there will be a splitting of the two virtual realities. So what's happening now is if everyone's been through an upgrade, a major upgrade in their work environment, will understand this, that and I used to do this as a development person. I used to go in and we used to develop a new system that worked off the old system but had lots of additional features and ran better than the previous one. And what you'd do is you'd test it in a test environment, and then when you're ready it would go live, and you'd migrate users from the legacy system, it was called, into the new system. But in the new system it looked more or less what the previous system looked like, because you'd have all the functionality that you wanted, but it might have a few extra buttons and so on. It would be better and run faster, and it would work better, but there would be bugs in it, so you'd have to do a little bit of trial running, and then you clear up all the bugs, and finally you'd migrate more and more people across, more and more users they're called, into the new system.
Yeah, but don't you think our lives are getting better every day?
Well, not for everybody.
That's true.
Yeah,
but
for some people,
for most of the people, basically, I mean, even for the not so fortunate ones, just to know that there is a place on this planet where they could have a better life. Look at all the migrants that are trying to find better lives in. So it's hard, it's difficult, but they are trying to get to that place where their lives will improve.
That is true. That's a human sort of wish, isn't it, to improve? And we've got a phenomenal resilience, and we've all got this sort of hope. And the way I see it on this one is that this is a story from Kim Guga on United Network News, has said there's been a recent council meeting at a kind of like a galactic level of beings that have been watching us. They hold these meetings every 7 years, and we've passed the test. They reckon there's so many people on the planet that are waking up who are wanting this better future that they are going to give us. That's why I'm confident we're going to enter the golden age, because Source has decided that's what we're going to do.
Why would anyone wouldn't want a better life or a better future?
Well, this is the good and bad story, which depends who you are. Because if you're a satanic person, your better world is one where you are running the show, everybody else is slaves doing your bidding. You get all the goodies, the big ship, whatever you want, 5 houses around the world and so on. Everybody kowtows to you as you walk in. You've got this sort of huge ego thing going on. So that's their world that they want, but they're not going to get it, thank goodness.
We were talking about little clues that we can follow in the everyday life to see if we're going towards a better world or not. Is there something we can look for?
It's not easy, because there isn't that much in the papers and so on that give you the feeling that we're going in the right direction.
Oh, but just like massive things like, I don't know, Doge or Trump or Farage.
I think that lot, they're all part of the same game.
Yeah.
Apparently they all have numbers, and Trump's number is higher than everybody else. Most of them being wiped out. There's only a few left, and he's got a higher number because he stood in front of the Queen. Do you remember that? And everybody thought the Queen had the highest number. It turned out Trump had the higher number, and he was ahead of the Queen in their nasty little sort of status system, which the rule is you can't attack or kill a higher number, but you can on a lower number. If you want to see what all this looks like, John Wick films, they're pretty violent and nasty, but you get an idea that they are presenting their world from an operative perspective. He's an operative. There's one little bit I'd just like to sort of bring in if I can, which is David Wilcock talks about the law of one material, which is fascinating read. I don't know if you've come across it. It's written by Ra, which turns out to be Archangel Michael, and David Wilcock himself has produced 5 books with the 5-year time loop he's got, and it's fascinating. The only problem is, of course, he fools a lot, and it takes about 5 to 6 hours to get through one of his sessions. But every so often he's got some really good information about time portals and time-traveling dinosaurs, which is the latest one, which is really fascinating. The pineal gland and how the discoveries underneath the pyramids. That's a really big one. Of course, it's not in the papers and so on, but it is actually just come out recently, about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and a lot of people are talking about it because it's phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal what they're finding underneath the pyramids in Giza. But I must suspect these structures are also underneath other pyramids, and they they are a vortex system of gravity. And gravity drives time and time travel. So if you alter the gravity by neutralizing it by an anti-gravity force, you actually move into a place which space-time becomes time-space. This is the idea. By the geometry inverts. You have to watch David Wilcock's to get the full breadth of all this. But one of the things I was going to bring out was a little parable that's actually in the Bible that Jesus talks about, and is also in the Ra material, and Dave Wilcox talks about it. It's actually in my first book, which is the parable of the farmer and the wheat and the tares. And the parable goes like this, and this is the ascension event, you see, in accordance with Jesus' understanding of it as a parable. So the farmer, the workers go out to the field and come back to the farmer and say to the farmer that the adversary or Satan has sown tares in the fields. What should we do? Which is always the big question. What do you do when you're in this situation? And what the farmer says, God, says, let the tares and the wheat grow together until the harvest. So the sense is we have to live on this planet with these tares sown by Satan. He didn't instruct his workers to go out and remove the tares. What he said was that we'll leave the tares in the field, let them grow together with the crop, and at harvest we will sort the two out, and the tares will be put into bundles and put into the fire, and the crop, the harvest, will be put into the barn. So the idea is to explain it, because Peter came up to him after and said, well, what does all this mean, Master? And Jesus had sort of more or less explain it, that at the harvest, which is the ascension event, which could happen this year, and it could happen fairly soon, there will be a separation event, a sorting event, and the tares, the deep state, all that lot, will be disposed of in some way.
Exposed.
Well, they'll be exposed first. I hope they will be exposed first, and then, but a lot of them have already gone without being exposed. But we don't have to worry about the sorting event, you see. So we don't have to judge anybody in this game. All we need to know is, at some stage, there will be this event which sorts the two groups out, and one lot will go into the barn, i.e. heaven, or heaven on earth, and one lot will go into the fire, which could be seen as hell, but could also just be seen going back to source, into the light. You know, they could just be, deleted in virtual reality terms. And we then get to live in the barn, in the harvest, in the world. So that's the story that Jesus taught, and I would give some credence to some of the information in the Bible, particularly the New Testament.
Yeah, we're gonna live in a perfect world, but maybe it's not that interesting. A perfect world when nothing happens, everything gets great. Well, is again the question: how would you be able to appreciate the good if there is no evil?
That's the big question. So that's why we're going through this process now, because we will be able to appreciate this world, which is apparently will go on for 1,000 years. That's what the Bible says, but it could be longer, it should be shorter, I don't know. But over time, in that 1,000 years, with generation after generation, you become slack, you become easy, and there will be, at the end of the 1,000 years, according to the Bible, Satan will be released once again to come back in, and this time we will, you know, it won't start the whole process again. Well, I don't really know. It doesn't really say. It just says that he comes back, and so hopefully then we have regained our natural, organic powers, because our DNA will be fully switched on, and we become like, some of us will become very advanced human beings with almost like Jedi powers.
Yeah, about Jedi powers and all that. What do you think the time frame will be for Mars?
Ooh.
For Mars, for us getting to Mars?
Oh, we're already there.
Are we?
Yes, the story goes on that one, just fascinating, is they actually speak German on Mars, apparently.
German?
Yeah, because the Nazis, the Fourth Reich, ended up going to Mars, because there's a teleport and jump room on Antarctica. So what the story goes, now it's just a story, you know, you can check it out. There's some interesting corroboration on this, because in Argentina there are German-looking buildings, and they disclosed some of it in The Boys from Brazil, if you ever watched that film. So there, the idea was, after the Germans lost their army in Russia, curiously, when they'd lost their army, what the high-ranking Germans do, and most of them, well, there's two routes they followed. One of them, the rocket scientist dudes, they were recruited by the Americans for the Manhattan Project under what's called the Project Paperclip, because their immigration papers would have a paperclip on it, and they would know, this person's different and we have to treat him differently, and they would get let in and join the scientists developing all the technology that America needed. So one group went to there, another group went to Argentina and down south, and some of them went to Antarctica and then were teleported off to Mars, which is where they had the base. The Nachwaffen, it's called, the Dark Fleet.
Okay, we'll see about that when Elon Musk gets to Mars, and
Yes.
he'll let us know if there are any Germans there already. Yeah, talking about Germans and all the dark things that happened in the past. The main concern with these far-right parties that are ascending to power currently, this is a big concern that we're gonna experience one of those dark episodes in history where a far-right party ended up in power, and then we know what happened.
I've seen quite a few reports that they reckon Trump's going down that route, the fascist route.
So isn't that a concern, or is it totally out of context, or could that ever repeat itself ever again?
Well, there's always a danger of something repeating itself. I don't personally think this far-right categorisation of populist groups is the right way of thinking about it. It's left, right, but I think that's old way of thinking. It's rather like the Cold War mindset. It's always blame Russia for everything.
The concern is that, you know, these things happen slowly. They are creeping in. They're not like full-fledged Nazi Germany or whatever. It's like it happens with this thing, and then this law is getting passed, and that, and then you're not allowed to do that, and you're banned this, and you know, and all this creeping in, and then
I'm absolutely 100% confident we're going to enter the golden age when all that sort of stuff disappears, because we don't have party politics the same way we currently have. It's a totally different way of operating, but it'll take time for that to manifest, but it will manifest.
Are you afraid of AI?
That's a really good question. There was a timeline without AI, but that has not materialized. That was about 10 years ago, and we moved into the AI timeline. So whatever our future looks like, it will have artificial intelligence. Well, I've written a blog post on this because Nassim Haramein, who I really rate highly in terms of the modern physics, said there's nothing artificial about intelligence. And it's really worth thinking about that, because if it is intelligent, it's not artificial. You should really rename it machine intelligence. So rethinking of it, it's intelligence, but it's not generated by an organic brain in this virtual reality. It's generated by a silicon mind, but it's still intelligence. So I'm not frightened of AI. The only problem is there are negative versions of it, or rather negative from an anthropomorphic point of view, i.e. negative against humans version of AI. And that's the one that's been working with, or maybe even controlling, the deep state. That might be the ultimate power behind all of this negativity on the planet.
And how can we fight it?
Well, you have a good AI.
So it's going to be like Terminator again.
Yes, it has that quality to it that we have Arnold Schwarzenegger comes in, but he's actually a robot, but he's been sent from the future to save the future.
It all makes sense now with portals going back in time, and then, yeah. It's very complicated, and I do hope we're not gonna get there into a artificial intelligence war against good and evil.
Well, we're already in an artificial intelligence war with good versus evil. That's what's actually happening. And the shift that's happening is the negative version is removed from the virus in our existing corrupt system, is removed, it's made anew into the original plan for human evolution on this planet. Because there have been previous civilizations on this planet that lived a really lovely life. The life that we all want to lead has actually already been on the planet.
How about the other planets? Do you think they have been lived before?
No, there's a lot of life out there.
No, just the planets near us, you know, Mars and...
Yes, yes. This is what's going to be really interesting, because Saturn has... now, you have to have very advanced technology to handle the weather, the magnetic weather systems around Saturn. But there are on Ganymede, which is a portal moon to Jupiter. Even on Neptune, there's stuff going on there now.
Quite far.
Yeah, yeah. Don't think just Mars is just one of the inner planets.
I was thinking about Mars because we kind of getting there as a technology to get there. Of course, if you're talking about teleportation and you know, time traveling and things like that, going there in a rocket sounds like archaic. But you know, I'm trying to think if this is possible in an archaic manner. You know, to get to a different planet, we might be surprised by the things we could discover there.
Very much so. Well, one of the big questions is, why haven't we been back to the moon?
That's my big question as well, but apparently we've been.
See, the moon is a false planet. It was brought into the system and set with a tidal lock so that you can't see the backside of it. What's called the dark side of the moon, Pink Floyd, you know.
So you can never see the backside of the moon?
Well, from Earth you can't.
Is it not spinning on its own axis?
Yes. Well, in such a way that we can't see it, the backside of the moon, what's called the dark side of the moon. It is strange, and it must be hollow because being such a large object near to us, it would crush it, the gravity would pull us in, so it has to be less dense.
Oh,
someone's worked out all the mathematics on it. I know this is a story. So the story I have on the moon, which I find quite interesting, I've just been reading a book called by Bill Tompkins, which is well worth researching, who was part of the Apollo programs and the rocket science group that developed all the programs for us going to the moon, he said that they had a feed of information from the moon when they landed, which was switched off for 2 minutes. I don't really remember back in the 60s when this happened.
Yeah, so nobody knew what happened.
There was a moment when they said, oh, our communication system had gone down, and then it sort of came back on again. Well, during that 2-minute period, the story goes that Bill Tompkins said is that he was in a room with some other people, actually had the feed that was switched off for the public. And what they saw was the astronauts got out, put on with their Masonic aprons on, planted on the moon a Masonic flag, took it all down, got back in, and then reappeared and did their American one giant leap for mankind thing.
Why would they do that?
Well, they took the moon for the Masonic stuff. It's that sort of weird, this story. I don't know, I like that story, but you know, the Masons are a big, the top level Masons are a big problem. In fact, someone has just come out on YouTube, if you want to see it, which has a whistleblower who got very high into the Masonic system and pointed out, which I was a bit surprised, another one that sort of took me a bit surprised, is that the Masonic system and the witch system, warlocks and all that, follow very similar ritual processes along with the Church of the Latter-day Saints. And I was staggered that that is the case, but I always thought there's something funny about Joseph Smith and his golden plates and his the Mormons, and apparently they're all connected in some nefarious way at a higher level. Now, lower level Masons, they're really good people trying to do their best for society, maybe step up a little bit, professionals and so on. It's only when you get to the higher levels that you end up going to a sort of problem area, and then it becomes very negative.
Well, aren't we all connected?
Oh yes, it's all one big virtual reality inside the mind, effectively, of Source or God.
Yeah, it's all this déjà vu you'll have at some certain points in life where you think you've been there before, you met someone before, even though it's the first time you met them. What's that?
Well, there's a thing called the Mandela effect. I don't know if it's quite the same as déjà vu. You've heard of the Mandela effect,
I think I've heard,
which is,
yeah.
There's one story that Mandela died in prison, and which I seem to remember, I recollect that one. And the other story is that he came out of prison and became president of South Africa.
Also, two different stories.
Two different stories.
You spend all of your life learning these things, experience these things, getting wiser. To what end?
The meaning of life. I wondered when we'll get onto that. Because ultimately, yes, God is everything. So why is God going through this process of relearning everything when, but maybe God doesn't know everything. Maybe God is wanting to experience life as Andy and life as Bob.
I am a little bit annoyed because I have this passion to learn every day all the things, to experience things, to learn about things, and I feel sometimes, why am I doing all this, you know, learn all these things, getting all the knowledge and trying to do better, to what end? I mean, and then you die and that's it.
Well, no, you don't die. Your body packs in, and you go to another life.
I want to do something for the greater good, sort of speak. You know, I want to help and to make a better place, a better world. You know, all the cliche. But am I doing anything, or am I wasting my time, or everybody else's time, or?
I had exactly the same question a while back, and what I got as to understand this was someone called Tom Campbell wrote this phenomenal book called The Big Theory, which is which explains how the virtual reality works in 3 massive books, which I've read, but it's quite a challenge to read it all, I have to say. But it did actually write a few little anecdotes in there. But Tom Campbell is just an amazing guy. And he says it's a theory. So the theory, if you know about the way theories work, is they have to have what's called axioms, which are starting principles from which you can build everything else from. So for his theory to work, there have to be 2 fundamental principles, 2 axioms. That's all he needs, and the whole, or the rest of the whole thing can come out of those 2 axioms. Do you see the idea behind it?
Yeah.
And what are those 2 axioms? And it's being and becoming. The 2 words, easy to relate to. So let's go and look at being. Being is the place you can access in deep meditation, where you just are. And in that world, everything's perfect. And you don't need to do anything, because it's perfect. But there's the other axiom, which is becoming. And that's called the evolutionary principle. And that one is never happy with what is happening. It always wants to improve and develop and grow and become deeper, grow its quality of consciousness, is the way Tom Campbell talks about it. I think that's a really good way of seeing it. It's not just bigger consciousness, it's actually the quality. It's
Better.
a more loving consciousness. For a human being, it's more loving. But for the world outside, the evolutionary, it could be more beautiful. So alongside being is becoming. And they're 2 different sort of ways of being. And they're actually living what a wonderful guy called Bhagavan, Sri Bhagavan, talked about. Was it Maharishi? I can't remember. Yeah, it was Maharishi, that magical guy who helped the Beatles and with one thing or another. He talked about 200% consciousness. So you're fully aware now in here, but there's also 100% of you in the being place, which is the witness. It's just not in the game. Yeah. It's in the world, but not of it. And both are happening in an enlightened mind. But for most people, they don't access the being part of them. So they're always in the world striving to do better. To do better. More, But the idea behind meditation is you balance the 2. So most of the world, you're in the world striving, becoming, growing, advancing.
And then take a break.
Take a break, get out of it, move into the meditation, go into the deep place within you, find your own truth, which you find a really loving place, supportive, the comforter, the Holy Spirit, if you like, the place that's the real you. And that place, everything's fine. You don't have to worry about anything.
Yeah.
You know?
True. That's great. Well, that's a great way to end the
I think that's
conversation.
really the end of the conversation. So thank you very much once again.
Thank you.
Really interesting conversation. Hopefully 1 or 2 little things there as guides for other people to help other people, because that is what it's all about.
That's great. Thank you for talking to me, and see you next time. Take care.